Good day, everyone. Richard Cowperthwait for Northwest Access TV, and thanks for joining us. Happy to have Jim Hughes, the veteran, longtime Franklin County State's Attorney, as our guest today. Jim, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Thanks for the time.
Having me.
Hey, thanks for coming out. Hope we're not keeping you from any very important work. I'm sure you'll catch up with that later today, I suspect.
Yes, I will.
And probably worth noting, we're taping this show on Monday, August 15. Boy, mid-August, summer moving right along, I guess, huh?
One of the fastest summers ever.
Is that right? Yeah, it seems like they probably seem faster every summer. So, Jim, I think we're talking the most veteran state's attorney in Vermont, are we not?
I think right now I am the county prosecutor with the most years under my belt.
Wow.
We had a couple folks, Will Porter over on the other side of the state, recently retired, and he was up there also.
One.
But yes, I'm in my 36th year.
Wow. And again, 36 a year as the state's attorney? Or
No,
as,
totally.
Total, including
yeah.
some deputy years?
Right. I was hired as a deputy state's attorney, and I began on Groundhog Day, 1987. I was 29 years old.
Is that right? Wow. And what had you been doing before that? You were living in South Burlington at the time?
The south side of Burlington.
South side of Burlington?
Yep. I went to St. Michael's College, graduated in 1979. I didn't grow up in Vermont. I grew up in Clinton, New York. And I was Clinton High School, class of 75.
Where's Clinton?
Clinton is just south of Utica.
Okay.
It's the bullseye center of New York State,
really?
right along Route 90, in Oneida County. Very nice place. I mean, when I came to St. Mike's and saw what Burlington looked like, it was a lot like home.
Really?
A lot of rolling hills, a lot of farms, dairy country. But Vermont and the area right there where I was at St. Mike's was a lot like home. Rolling hills, had bigger hills for skiing and a much bigger lake for better fishing. So I really liked what I saw. And after St. Mike's, I went to Franklin Pierce Law Center in Concord, New Hampshire.
New Hampshire, yeah.
Went directly, no time off, no in-between jobs or whatever. And then
Had you wanted to be a lawyer? Was that kind of, when you were a kid, were you thinking lawyer?
Well, my dad was an attorney.
Oh, really?
And he was in a small firm and then a private practitioner on his own for a long time as I was growing up in Utica and had a home office in Clinton. So I knew, as we used to joke, I was getting the third degree throughout my high school years. Anytime I was a little past curfew, we'd face the questioning. So I had that at least knowledge of what the career would be like if I went into it. But at St. Mike's, I was a biology major. I got my BA in sciences, and I was on the pre-med schedule.
Really?
But a C+ in physics isn't going to get you into med school. So as a support for a friend of mine who was a political science major and wanted to go to law school and had a career, path all laid out, one of my roommates at the time wanted to take the LSAT, but didn't have anybody to go with him, and so he was a little bit trepidatious, if you will. And so I said, I'll do that. I think it was $6 to sign up for the test at the time.
So just kind of for the heck of it?
Pretty much for the heck of it.
Really?
And I knew that I had to do something after getting a BA, because there weren't a lot of jobs just for, especially in the biology fields, unless you get a master's or a doctorate or something. So anyhow, we got together and got a ride down to UVM early in the morning on the day of the test, and we both did pretty well. And so I decided to apply to a couple of law schools, and fortunately, the pressure came off about 10 days before the end of my senior year, before senior week. I got my acceptance to Franklin Pierce Law Center.
Wow.
And went there, and turned out I was the fifth or sixth youngest person in the class, because most everybody had either taken time off after they graduated college or had a career going. And Frank's wanted to be the law school that was the intersection of law and science. And over the years, it's grown. Right now, it's Franklin Pierce is the University of New Hampshire's School of Law.
Oh, yeah, official school.
And the Franklin Pierce name is still there, but it's intellectual property, and and it still has a good scientific component to their patent law school and things like that.
Interesting. So you get out of law school, and then what?
And then headed back, completely broke, headed back and lived with my folks for about a year and a half. Got a job doing title searches for a titles firm out of the office building in Utica.
So your father didn't give you a job?
Well, he got me that job.
Okay.
And it was, he knew I had to learn some skills, and learning about property law and how to do a title search actually did pay off a lot later on.
Did he have some hopes that he had his own practice? Did he have some hopes that you might take over his practice?
He did, but he also knew that I wasn't really enthusiastic about that. I mean, if I did go into practice with my dad, I'd still be a junior partner.
Yeah.
And, that wasn't really that attractive. I did do some things with him. He wrote some complaints and filed some things, just to get a feeling of how the system worked in Oneida County. No, I did that for probably 18 months, and in the off time, I studied for the bar exam. Took a class at Syracuse University, one of these, just bar review crash courses that lasted about a month. And then I took the New York State Bar in Albany on Tuesday and Wednesday. Wednesday night, packed everything I owned in my big old Buick LeSabre, and drove to Montpelier and took the Vermont Bar on that Thursday. So three days of testing in a row. And stayed, essentially.
And obviously passed both states?
Yep. I'm
Better
still
guy
licensed
than
in New York, but haven't been back.
Is that right?
And been practicing here since. And I got a place to stay, house sitting for some St. Mike's friends of mine up in Underhill, and started knocking on doors in Burlington. Got a job as a law clerk, because at the time you did have to do 6 months of a clerkship before you could get your license, even after you passed the bar.
Is that still the case?
It is, but there's a lot of exceptions to it now, and you can do the clerkship in between your first and second year of law school, and in between your second and third, so it's all done by the time you pass the bar.
And of course, Vermont, one of the only states, or the only state where you don't have to go to law school.
Right.
You can clerk your way to.
That you can still read for the law.
Read for the law.
Yep. And
I think that sounds pretty cool. Is that the only state, Jim? I'm sure there are not many states.
I don't think there's many, if any, others. I really haven't looked that far.
Yeah.
Between New York and Vermont, that's enough.
Yeah.
Enough territory to cover. But anyhow, so I got a job in Burlington clerking and doing title searches, mostly doing that property law. This was in 84 and 5 and 6. And there was a lot of refinancing going on because of the interest rates going up or down. Either way, people want to, try to hook onto the lowest rate they can. So did a lot of closings, a lot of real estate law, worked in the banks more than in the courts. But I did do some criminal defense work. I got on the list for the federal court because my office was right downtown on College and Center Street. I could be at the federal court in a few minutes, usually. And so that was, put me on call for them, essentially, and they paid pretty well. And I got to represent the smugglees that were caught at the border.
Really?
The smugglers were usually a more complicated case, and since I was brand new, they were still sort of training me by representing the customers of the smugglers that would bring them across. And usually it was essentially a deportation hearing more than a criminal trial. But got a little bit of experience going in the criminal court. And then it was late 86, early 87, there was an opening in the Franklin County State's Attorney's Office. And I interviewed, and I happened to have done some closings and some hearings with Howard Van Benthuizen, who was the state's attorney at the time and had an open deputy position, and he hired me. I asked for 2 weeks to shut down the office I was in and, take care of the clients that had pending things and make sure everybody was covered that needed it. And I think it was 4 or 5 days later, I got a phone call from Attorney Van Benthuizen, said, I need you to start tomorrow.
Really?
There's a case on in Hyde Park. I can't do it. The other deputy has a conflict. I'm going to swear you in over the phone. You know how to get to the courthouse in Hyde Park? I said, yes, I could, find it. He goes, I'll have a trooper deliver the file for you tonight and, have at it.
So why was he dealing with a case in Hyde Park?
Yeah, this was a conviction that came out of Franklin County.
Okay.
It was a second-degree murder, I found out, after the trooper pulled into my driveway, popped the trunk, and picked up the file box to bring in for my 8:30 in the morning hearing.
Wow.
But what had happened is there was a lady that was convicted of a homicide. She had stabbed a person that wanted to be her boyfriend, and they got in an argument over that in one of the apartments above what is now Jeff's Main Seafood. And she was convicted and sentenced, and her sentence brought her to Alderson, West Virginia, which is a female prison.
That sounds familiar.
On one side of the road, and on the other side of the road is a state hospital, a mental health facility. And this woman, the defendant, would alternate. She'd spend about 2 weeks in prison, decompensate, then be shipped to the state hospital across the street, then about 2 weeks getting medicated and treated, and then brought back to the prison where she would decompensate again. And this routine happened several times. She'd been, the conviction was more than a year and a half old before this sentence reconsideration hearing. And it was a bad situation. But so my first hearing as a deputy state's attorney involved people from Vermont's Department of Corrections, West Virginia's Department of Corrections, mental health experts from West Virginia, parole and probation officers from Vermont, outlining the programs that could or could not happen because this was a serious offense and an offender who was sentenced. And the judge at the time essentially granted the motion for sentence reconsideration and brought the defendant back to Vermont. And eventually, within a short period of time, 6 months to a year, was released to a halfway house.
Really?
And started to do a lot better. And I knew that because in the summertime, my house was in between the halfway house where this defendant was housed and Oak Ledge Park.
Really?
And so she and the people that worked with her, her one-on-ones, would walk down my street. And I always got a big wave. Oh, look, there's Mr. Hughes. That's my prosecutor.
Interesting.
And as they went down to the park.
Were you arguing for the original sentence to hold for that?
Essentially, my position was that the sentence was correct. That's what my boss had told me should happen.
Yeah.
But as the hearing went on, and we heard, everybody got a sense of what this defendant had been going through, and it really wasn't humane. I mean, just to have to be held at a state hospital and treated for her decompensating mental health, every month, it seemed, for a couple of weeks.
So your first case, that was quite the case, huh?
Yep, and the judge understood that, and I think everybody there pretty much understood that this wasn't the way it was supposed to be. Sure, there was a sentence that had to be imposed. She took a life. But, it still had to be sort of tailored to her needs and her treatment needs and her rehabilitation. So,
wow, interesting.
But yeah, so the first case I was kind of thrown in both feet in the fire. But it came out okay, really haven't slowed down that much since.
That doesn't sound like you have. So fast forward a while, Howard Van Benthuizen, of course, later becomes a judge, I guess after going into private practice for a bit. You remain as deputy prosecutor, but opening comes up and you get appointed state's attorney.
That's right, and that was quite a little political bunch of months there in 1995.
So 1995.
Yeah, because Howard Van Benthuizen, my boss, now Judge Van Benthuizen, retired.
Oh, is he retired?
He is retired, but he comes
Still
back
does some stuff.
to do, they call retired judges in to help with the backloads and to clean up calendars or to do, a situation where another judge might have a conflict of interest.
Right.
And so he has been on the bench every so often since. But in 1995, State's Attorney Van Benthuizen wanted to be a judge and was advised to round out his resume because he started his career as a police officer in Shelburne and then had some time after law school in private practice, which is where I met him doing real estate closings. And then he was the state's attorney. So I think the powers that be that were on the judicial nominating committee wanted to see a little bit more either defense work or civil work rounding out his experience before they put him on the bench. And so he did that. He went into practice with local attorney Greg Rainville, who is now Judge Greg Rainville. And they worked together for a while before the governor did finally appoint Judge Van Benthuizen to the bench.
I was doing pretty busy reporting back then, and I can remember Judge Van Benthuizen, and I remember he really wanted to be a judge, and he pulled it off. Did you ever have any interest in yourself in becoming a judge?
No.
Boy, talk about one of the many jobs I sure can't imagine.
I kind of like the adversarial part of practicing law, taking a position and arguing for it, putting the evidence on, and I just making the decision. It can be done. I could do it, I think, but I mostly didn't want to have my life run by the court clerks in 6-minute increments. That you're always doing something, and you always have to be available for calls and search warrants and things like that. And especially starting out soon after starting in '87, it was I think it was November of 1989. I had my first kid. So and I had, through my career, I have 3 children. And so there was a lot more importance, I thought, at the time to do a good job in the position I had and raise the family. And hopefully, I think they've turned out well, and I think the career kind of kept going and turned out okay.
And judges get moved around also. It's not like, and that routinely happens. That's part of the thing, right?
Yes. I mean, I could have a home base, and just have to commute to the courthouse.
Interesting.
But sometimes the travel is a little bit far.
Yeah. But then you've had, I guess some might call it a charmed political life, but you could also look at it that you presumably been doing a pretty good job, but you never had an opponent, correct, as state's attorney?
That's right. I got appointed in '95, and then I think the first election was '98. And so Judge Van Benthuizen did me a big favor by stepping down midterm or early in a 4-year term, because that gave the public a chance to get to know me, running the office, being the chief prosecutor, and gave me a chance to either establish myself or step in the mud and show people that they ought to be looking for somebody else. But good for me. Luckily, things went well at the beginning, and I never. I think it was, if I counted right, I think it was 7 elections.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
And never had an opponent. So that, knock on wood, that was a good thing. I didn't have to spend money on those, lawn signs or that case of Maalox you always need towards the end.
So easy to, of course, you're not running for re-election. You're in your last term now. I hope you're not going
That's
to
right.
pull a T.J. Donovan and disappear before your term's up.
Well, I may.
Oh, is that,
Because,
oh, you
yeah,
may.
because
Interesting.
several reasons.
Funny I
But the
mentioned that.
biggest one is I'm backing my deputy, John Lavoie,
Right.
who is running, and you see his signs are
Yeah.
popping up around Franklin County.
And he does have
He's-
an opponent, Zach Waite, a Milton lawyer, resident.
Milton resident, he's got an office in Burlington. He's been a defense attorney. I'm not sure of his private practice
Yeah.
areas, but he's on the conflict list. So if the public defenders cannot represent somebody, there's several attorneys around Franklin and Chittenden County that are on the conflict list.
Someone you've
And
dealt
so
with in court at
I
times?
have dealt with Mr. Waite. He's
Interesting.
competent.
Yeah.
He's a good guy.
Huh.
But I'm backing John
Gotcha.
because I've known John Lavoie. He started as a deputy almost the same time I did.
Really?
And in our first year as prosecutors, he was down south, and I was in Franklin County. But we both went to the Career Prosecutor College
Really?
at the University of Houston, put on by the National District Attorneys Association. And that was about a 3-week, maybe 3 weeks and a day long classroom mock trial
Wow.
training boot camp for attorneys to give you the real spirit and the ins and outs of being a prosecutor and representing the government and the people and trying to get convictions. So we got to know each other pretty well down in Houston. The first 3 days of that 3 weeks were beautiful. It was in June or July.
Boy, Houston doesn't sound
It
like
was-
the best weather place in the world.
It was sunny and nice, and we went to Galveston Island
Oh, really?
the first
Wow.
couple days just in our off time because it was a beach and it was
Yeah.
close by. And then it started raining.
Wow.
And there was a tropical depression that lasted for 12 days.
Wow.
And it rained almost 10 inches a day for 12 days in a row.
Yeah, the
It was-
flooding problems, Houston, I pay a lot of attention to the weather, and Houston just sounds like it's just been a nightmare of flooding
Yeah.
issues.
We lived
Wow.
in the towers on campus, and I think I was on the 14th floor of a 28-story
So still
tower, and my
above the
roof
flood
leaked.
waters, hopefully. Is that right?
Yeah.
Wow.
No, it was fun.
Yeah.
But I got to know John there, and then we would see each other yearly at our training camps because
Yeah.
the state's attorneys get together during the Judicial College Week.
Yeah.
The judges get together. They're all lawyers. They need to keep their licenses and have their continuing legal education.
Yeah.
So they would go to one spot, and the public defenders would gather at some other place where they could get together and have their classes and their CLEs, and the state's attorneys would go somewhere.
Yeah.
And so I got to see John yearly, and then I forget when it started, but John has family in Franklin County, and his son was getting into high school, and so he asked me if I ever had an opening he'd love to transfer from down south to Franklin County, so he could be
Down
nearer
south
to his.
being, where was it?
I can't remember if
But
it was
southern-
Bennington or
So southern
Brattleboro.
Vermont, southern
Yeah,
Vermont.
so- yeah. Not south,
Gotcha.
but the banana belt of Vermont.
Yeah.
So it turned out I did have a deputy that wanted to move on, and John transferred up, and
Interesting.
he's been here for a long time. He knows the area. He lives in the county.
Yeah.
He's been involved in a lot of activities through his son in the high school, and
He's a
just
runner,
by
is he
being
not?
here-
Is he a runner, a marathoner?
Yeah, a lot of people who
runner?
don't know him
Yeah.
would
Probably
see
have
him
seen
on the
him running.
street and would recognize him because he's a ultra marathoner.
Right, really?
He likes to travel to mountainous areas
Wow.
and run the 100-mile mountain up and down races that
Wow.
would just kill me or most anybody else.
That's
But,
impressive.
yeah, but he doesn't look like he's having fun when he runs. He's an arm runner, and a lot of people have complimented him on his endurance, but also said it looks like it hurts a lot when you're doing that. So if people see John on the street, give him a wave, give him a vote.
Is he your chief? Have you got a hierarchy in the office? Is
Well,
he
really
your,
don't.
You don't, really don't.
One of my deputies,
Diane Wheeler's been with
Diane
you for
Wheeler,
a lot of
really
years.
liked to say that she was the chief deputy. She'd been there longer,
Yeah.
but there's no real.
Hierarchy.
You don't get paid more by
Yeah.
being a chief deputy.
right.
You don't get any extra time off or there's no extra duties or
Yeah.
supervisory duties. There's 5 deputies. So
Is that 5 deputies and yourself, so
Yep.
6 prosecutors in the office?
Yep, Diane.
It seems like everybody's having problems with staffing. Have you been okay? Has that been an issue for you?
Well, we're short because
I am.
the state government doesn't want to grow.
Huh.
And everybody in my office has a state position number.
Huh.
And that's how some people judge whether state government is too big or growing too fast is by the number of state employees.
Right.
So it's really hard to get a state position number. We've been understaffed forever. There's studies out there about how many cases a prosecutor ought to have,
Yeah.
and we're above that number constantly.
Really?
Everybody in my office is above that number.
Really?
We just don't have, they're not going to staff
Sure.
more attorneys in the prosecutor's office.
Ideally, how
Partially.
many more prosecutors do you think you could use or
Well, I
should
could certainly
have?
use 2.
2 more, is that right? 2
And
more?
then the support staff, so a couple, 3 office,
Really?
front office people, filing clerks,
Really?
and another victim's advocate.
Wow.
Because I've got 2, and that's not nearly enough.
Wow. No reason to think that situation changes anytime soon. if
Well,
ever.
we do have a possibility of hiring right now, limited, what do they call them? Time-limited positions. It's hourly only, no benefits, and it's good for something like 15 months.
Oh, yeah.
And then it's over.
Yeah.
And so that's not the most attractive kind of
Right.
job to get into. I've been trying to sell it as, at least you get your foot in the door, and if there is some turnover, by then, hopefully we'd know you and like you and want to keep you. So I've gotten some resumes. We're just in the position now to start trying to do interviews and get people in the door, but it's not attorneys, it's staff.
Right. So back to John Lavoie. So it
Right.
sounds like you're
And
pondering maybe not serving out your full term.
And the reason is,
Yeah.
if I can work it, and I don't know if it's in the works. We
Yeah.
haven't got the answer yet.
Yeah.
But if I do retire sooner, and John Lavoie is the interim state's attorney,
Yeah.
then
And whose call would making him interim?
that's mine.
That's your call.
Right, I
so
can
you
say
could make him interim
we
state's
can,
attorney.
yes, this is the person acting in my
Okay.
stead until the election.
Yeah.
Because it's so close to the election, I don't think that the governor or one of the political boards has to
Right.
weigh in.
You wouldn't think they'd bother with such a short time.
Right, that's what I'm thinking, and that's where the question is.
Gotcha.
But the hope is that John can assume my position number, opening up his to let us hire an attorney to come in sooner rather than later to help with the transition, that's going to come in January.
Interesting.
And that's in the works, and that's what we're hoping to do. So
So backing, obviously, as you said, backing your deputy there.
yes,
I would think he would be helped by Zach Wade not being a Franklin County resident. I would think that might be worth something, but who knows?
well, that was an impediment to me becoming the state's attorney.
Right, when you were in Burlington
Right.
at the time.
I lived there. My wife worked at the Fletcher Allen
Right.
Hospital, and worked evenings, 3 to midnight.
Right.
So the 1 mile commute for her was safer and
Sure.
easier, and I could do the 30 miles from Ferguson Avenue to Franklin County easier. Went through a couple cars that way, but it still worked all right. So, yeah, but when I was named by Howard Van Mathuizen to be the interim state's attorney,
Yeah.
it was early in the term. And so the process is to have your local political party committee
Right.
send names to the governor.
And you've always run as a Democrat. or am I wrong about
No,
that?
no, that's correct. I was an independent,
Huh.
you know, as a deputy,
Oh, is that right?
and since I could vote, I just never just picked a party.
Right.
I like to vote for people
Yeah.
and their platforms, not just I don't pull the party lever type of thing.
Yeah.
But our Franklin County Democrats didn't want to send my name to the governor because I didn't live in Franklin County. And they wanted a Franklin County attorney to be the prosecutor, to represent the people, which makes sense. Sure. And I certainly, at the time, didn't think that should matter. And it's not law, it's just a political reality.
It's not law. Yeah.
But I have since learned, and long story short, I mean, with a lot of campaigning, I did get the governor to notice me and got some recommendations enough so that Howard Dean did, in the summer of '95, appoint me to be the elected state's attorney for Franklin County.
Right.
And during his press conference where he announced some important things that he had done and then said that he had appointed me to be the state's attorney, he stated in no uncertain terms, and Jim Hughes is going to move to Franklin County.
Is that right?
I had never told him I would, but
So you hadn't given him that commitment yourself?
I had made sure that I would not make that promise because I still, and some of it was just practical because at the time we had just doubled the size of our house with a big addition on the home on Ferguson Ave. I had tried to sell it, and it didn't get a bite because I wanted to move to Franklin County.
Boy, you'd be
it didn't
doing
happen.
pretty well these days if you had that house right about now, probably, huh?
I think so, but anyhow.
Well, so
he
the
made that
governor,
announcement.
the governor said Jim will be moving to Franklin County.
Yeah, and
interesting.
Caused some good discussions around the dinner table, but
that eventually happened.
it did, and it was.
And you were a long-time St. Albans city resident, correct?
Yes, and once I got up here,
Yeah.
I mean, my kids were grade school age,
Yeah.
and I think 2 were in grade school and 1 was still preschool. And I got involved with the schools and the sports, and and I ended up working with the St. Albans Sharks as a starter and a stroke judge at the swim meets because I had some experience in that. I started coaching the youth hockey. Both my son and my daughter played, and I ended up coaching the Saints with Ed and Mary Schumer for years and years and years.
My good friends, the Schumers. Wow.
Yep, and we had a good run, a couple of state championships with the girls. I think I started at the 10 and under age, and we ended up all the way to 18 and under.
Wow.
So we had a lot of hockey.
Wow, sounds like
fun.
you've been a pretty active guy already.
And I learned that our county Democrat committee was pretty much right on. You've got to be involved in the community that you're going to be working representing.
Yeah.
Not just to know people, but to know what's going on in the mores of the community and what's really valuable. And it helped a lot, I think, being a Franklin County person, a citizen up here, not just driving in and being the state's attorney, prosecuting for 8 hours a day and disappearing.
Yeah. And speaking of election, I want to go back to the August 9 primary. So it sounds like you, with Doug DeSabato, your colleague in Grand Isle County, and I think a couple of former Chittenden County state's attorneys, correct me if I'm wrong, but anyway, you ended up backing Ted Kenny, who of course challenged Sarah George, the Chittenden County state's attorney, in the Democratic primary, with George winning fairly easily. But seems like was that kind of an unusual? Had you ever done that before? Was that kind of an unusual situation or step to take?
Well, it was. I didn't initiate it. I mean, Ted asked me if I would back him, and I said yes. I've known him for years and years. Actually,
you
knew his dad.
You know Sarah George pretty well.
I do know Sarah also.
Okay.
Yep. And I just don't agree with a lot of Sarah's prosecutorial philosophies. When I got to be the elected here, I told our local law enforcement, that if any of your officers, putting their life on the line. They're putting their time into investigating. If they feel strongly enough to charge somebody with a crime
Yeah.
and actually write it up and send it to me, I'll do what I can to make that stick. And it didn't, there wasn't a list of crimes or laws that I wasn't going to enforce.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be on the side of law enforcement.
Yeah.
And I think that's been my career. We go to the mat with the fish and wildlife cases, even when judges say, I'm too backed up to hear these, this isn't something that hurt people or was it might have been a reckless act or a unintentional act. If you think the doe had horns or antlers and you shoot it and you're wrong, you've committed a fish and wildlife violation.
Yeah.
And you're going to pay a fine and get points on your license and maybe lose your license.
Yeah.
But it's not, the wardens do a darn good job out there, and I wanted to back them as much as possible. It seems that in Chittenden County, there's not the same backing for law enforcement, and it's not just Sarah. I mean, the city
Of course, the
board
Burlington Police Department has been a huge story forever, it seems like, here, with just lack of staffing and stuff. But
lack of support.
Lack of support.
The defund the police, movement that was countrywide, it seemed, stuck in Burlington.
Yeah, I've got one very good conservative friend who's literally boycotting Burlington over this, will not spend 1 cent of his money in Burlington, just cannot believe the Prague's pretty much in control of the Burlington City Council, but tough situation. I was struck by, I'm hardly close to the situation these days, but Sarah George winning pretty easily in the primary.
I think she took every town.
Yes, I think she did too.
Which is, good for her.
But boy, the police situation, as you know, way better than me, pretty tough, and I was struck by her, not real conciliatory comments about, I think after elected, hey, I'm the elected official around here, not the police, but boy, it sounds like continuing to be a pretty tough situation in Chittenden County.
Yep, she has her convictions, and she's sticking to them. I mean, which is great. I disagree with her, but maybe not with the backbone she has and the stick-to-itiveness that she's showing in an agenda I don't think is correct, but and I don't think would fit in Franklin County, because there's just a whole different mindset. And I think a more down to earth,
sounds like
makes sense kind of mindset in the folks up here.
I wake up to the WVMT folks on radio every morning. Kurt Wright being the co-host, pretty solid guy. Met him one time, but he was a huge backer. In fact, they were on Sarah George's case again this morning, pretty much every morning. But he was a huge backer of Ted Kenny, but was very upset that Kenny ran in the Democratic primary in Chittenden County, saying, "Hey, good luck.
Right.
You should have run in November as presumably as a Republican or independent with the whole state." But I guess that's so much for, in retrospect, that looks like that probably would have been good advice.
I think Kurt
Did you have a feel for that race? Did you think Kenny had a chance?
Well, yes. I mean, because
just with the
I know him,
situation.
and he even though he was a defense lawyer, he's a good defense lawyer who wouldn't just waste time or do a shotgun approach to try to win a acquittal for his client at any cost, but he would try to focus on issues and do a good job that way and wouldn't waste time. And the judges respect him for that, and so did I. So, when he asked me if I would back him, I said yes and did.
Did you get some grief, or did some folks give you some grief over that, or not?
Not yet.
Probably, maybe not so much in Franklin County anyway.
Right. I don't think a lot of people cared that much what happened in the race down there, beyond law enforcement.
Talking about, you just mentioned, I mean, obviously it just seems like good quality police work is the key for you. Yours sounds like as good as what you get from law enforcement. Right. Out of curiosity, of the affidavits you get of police charging someone with a crime, what the percentage of cases you actually prosecute based on that? Is that a very high percentage?
Yes. Yes. And if there's something wrong with an affidavit,
Yeah.
and, everybody who sends me their cases has missed something
Sure.
somewhere along the road, and whether it's, the amount of the bad check, whether it's the amount of things that were stolen from the retail store, I won't just decline it.
You'll
I'll call
talk,
the officer
talk
and
to
say,
them.
I need something from you, supplemental affidavit or a correction. It could be as little as, a driving offense, and they don't
Right.
put the magic line in there that, the Sheldon Road is a public highway under Title 23 in the state of Vermont.
Interesting.
Because, if it's against the law to drive with a suspended license or to drive under the influence on a public highway.
Right.
And if you don't put the on the public highway, the judge isn't going to find probable cause. You're not going to get to court. So we try to fix that
So
as you
sounds like
review it.
sounds like you have a very good relationship with local law enforcement.
I hope so. I mean,
so.
I've tried to keep that over the years. But, I've also had to prosecute law enforcement when there's been offenses, and things happen. But because, even though I work with them, that's the law enforcement team goes from the officers on the street, up their chain of command, and then to me. And so I always try to keep a good relationship, but we also have to have the high standards
Gotcha.
for people who are enforcing the law. The laws apply to them too.
Right. Speaking of which, we have a situation, as you well know, with the Franklin County Sheriff's Department now with Captain John Grismore. Much in the news. I was interested in I was hearing this on like radio, TV news for days, and no reference that he happened to be, or is the only candidate on the ballot for Franklin County Sheriff. Maybe media finally caught up with that. But anyway, the incident in which he's alleged to have, the videos here, kicked a detainee in the groin. But again, just because of the local connection, I assume your office, if he ends up being charged, would not be involved in that, or is that not necessarily the case?
It's not necessarily the case. I haven't seen any write-ups. I saw the video, and I believe the kick was to the detainee's stomach.
No, stomach?
Yeah.
Okay,
I
so
think
it looked like groin, but stomach in any case. But it sure looked like a kick.
It was a kick. When I see the detainee statement or the witness's statement, because the camera angle I saw of the film, you couldn't actually see where his boot landed. But I believe it was more of a push out kick, not a upwards kick to the groin.
And state police are investigating. Obviously,
That's
the
right.
sheriff's department's kicked it out to state police.
Sheriff Langevin did the right thing, went to the state police pretty much immediately, asked for an independent investigation.
Yeah.
He didn't, it wouldn't be right for fellow officers or deputies to investigate Deputy Grismore.
But a Franklin County case, so obviously if a charge is brought, you would initially get that paperwork,
I probably
assume?
would get it at the same time as the Attorney General, just
the
in
Attorney
anticipation that there would be a conflict.
And if so,
but I haven't seen it yet.
the Attorney General's office would be dealing with that,
Yes.
presumably?
Yes.
Okay. And that's come up a number of times over the years when there was a conflict. I mean, that's come up sometimes.
Yes, it has.
Yeah.
I mean, there was sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. I mean, I had to prosecute the chief of the city police department at one point.
Right.
The allegation was he stole property from the evidence locker.
I recall that case very well.
And I didn't send that away.
Oh, really?
It was a pretty straightforward
Yeah.
thing, and it was the chief hadn't been sending cases over. He ran his office. He ran the department. He didn't get out on patrol and do cases. So it wasn't like we had that kind of a relationship. So I didn't feel, and attorneys essentially call their own conflicts.
Yeah.
It's an ethical thing that if you feel you have a conflict, you tend to, and you get out of the case. If you don't, and you know that you can be fair and just about it, you stick with the case.
Interesting. How the quality of police work, again, talking about how, the key for you is getting good quality affidavits, whatever, investigations from police. Is the quality of that, has that changed much over the years? Is that,
Oh, it's gotten better.
it's gotten better?
Not that I'm a big fan of the body-worn cameras,
Yeah.
but now most officers have the Axon cameras right on their uniform. So they're, there's evidence backing up their affidavits. It's not like, the old Texas one riot, one ranger, and then the one officer that was on the scene testifies under oath, this is what happened. And people can try to pick it apart, and with other witnesses that saw things differently or whatever. Now we've got typically a video or several recording the same events, and the affidavits are going to reflect what the video has, and the video is going to reflect what the officers wrote.
You
But
said
also-
you're not a big fan of that?
Oh, it's caused me so much more
Just time?
work.
Is that right? Wow.
Because just the way the system is to make the videos available for the defense. It's just, and watching them. I mean, I can read an affidavit,
Right.
pretty quickly. They're usually 2 to 3 or 4 pages. Sometimes bigger cases get bigger, but if there's 5 officers on scene and all of their cameras are running, I've got to watch, the same thing 5 times to make sure that I pick up on it, everything.
Wow, hear you.
To say the least. And now, with our new paperless system in the court, if I'm going to go to trial, I've got to upload and digitize all of my evidence and have it in a computerized, presentable fashion before the trial. And it takes a good 5 minutes to just take a picture, label it, scan it into the computer, throw it into our Odyssey system and upload it, wait for it to be accepted, and get the email back saying, yes, okay, this one's done, you did a good job, it's accepted, it's in your evidence, and then I'll go to the rest of the 102 pieces of evidence and do the same thing. And so it adds a lot of time to be paperless. We were back in the day, I could go to court with my stack of pictures, stick an evidence sticker on it, show it to the witness, have it identified, show it to the jury, pass it around. Things were
Yeah, it sounds like a
Simple.
ton more work. Speaking of trials, plea bargains often get kind of bad raps from the public, I guess, but just an obvious point to, I think, a lot of people. It's not like, oh, you should go to trial. Never do a plea bargain. I mean, forget it. What staff would you need? 100 full staff? If
Well,
every case went to trial?
right. We need 5 more courthouses and 10 more judges.
So for folks who
just
are
to-
down on plea bargain, I mean, it's just kind of the way it's got to be.
It has to be.
Yeah.
That's our system.
Yeah.
There's good points and bad points about
Right.
plea bargaining, but I'd be still dealing with 1995 cases in 2022 if everybody went to trial.
Yeah.
I mean,
What percentage go to trial, Jim? We're talking
less than
very-
10.
Less than 10. Interesting.
And it's more like probably 5 or 6%.
Yeah, that's probably what I would have guessed.
But it's, on both sides, it's better to know the outcome,
Yeah,
the defendant wants a voice in the sentence,
yeah,
and a voice in how much culpability they're going to admit to. The prosecutor doesn't want to be putting victims on the stand and subjecting them to being in front of the jury and bearing their soul and being cross-examined. The trials are good, and they do end cases. I mean, the jury will most of the time reach a verdict, and then even a hung jury in a mistrial pushes the case along. Either you know your weaknesses or you know what might be an outcome. So they're more than likely to settle after that.
interesting.
But no, you have to have plea bargains, or the system would just grind to a halt.
Yeah, the percentage of people charged, of all the cases you bring charges, the percentage that end up getting convicted, have you got a?
No.
Don't
No, and
have-
I've never kept track
No, really.
of either wins or losses.
Interesting.
If you go to trial,
Yeah,
like.
so
I
you
don't know.
don't keep
Well,
track of trials even, huh?
No,
Interesting.
because, I mean, if I have a crime committed in front of the Catholic school nuns field trip, and 20 sisters are looking out the window and see somebody throw a rock through a store window, I've got 20 nuns to be eyewitnesses, identifying the person and identifying what they did. That guy's not going to go to trial. And he's going to want to plead and do whatever. And I know that. And the other side of the coin, when something does go to trial, it's because either the defendant has nothing to lose or too much to lose, and is going to try everything they can to avoid a guilty verdict, or there's something wrong with the case. Instead of the bus full of Catholic nuns, if it was a prison bus, taking all the felons to a court hearing, and they were the witnesses, and the only witnesses, I might have an issue bringing that evidence in front of a jury. So the cases that actually go to trial typically have something wrong with them. A weakness in the evidence, a weakness in the witnesses, something, and it takes a while to go to trial. So if something has been pending for a year, people's memories fade, witnesses move away, die, things happen.
And the pandemic,
life goes on.
Right, the pandemic, that sounds like that must have messed things up big time, I would think.
Oh, yes. But the point is, I didn't, I've always told my deputies, especially new hires, do not keep a record of your quote-unquote wins or losses. Because typically, you're going to have a trial on the weakest case you've got. And if you lose that, well, you tried. But if you win it, great. But it's not something you should keep track of, because it's not a fair record.
Interesting.
Because your strongest cases are all going to plead up.
Interesting point. T.J. Donovan, again, our former state attorney, well, I would have bet my life that he would have been the next governor. For some reason had the sense that he was waiting for Phil Scott to go away and keep Vermont's amazing tradition of alternating Republican and Democratic governors that goes back since '62. I think the Republicans better find some candidates after Phil Scott. But anyway.
Well, I thought he was going to run for Senator Leahy's spot,
or run for
or Bernie's. So that.
That's a good point. Or run for
because that was the track.
Office.
That was the track that Senator Leahy took, was from the Chittenden County State's Attorney's office.
State's Attorney, 1974.
So
interesting. I was going to mention I know it happened in Franklin County, maybe all or some of the other counties, expunging a number of cases. I remember that being in the news in the last, half year or so. Was that with your approval, I assume, or was that a collaborative effort with him? I remember him being in the news about it.
Right. No,
relatively minor cases, or
he was doing an expungement clinic.
An expungement clinic.
Kind of a traveling roadshow as the Attorney General into different counties. And he called me up and asked if I wanted to participate with him. I really didn't, but the law said there's going to be expungements.
Sorry, the law says that?
Yeah, I mean our legislature under the title of workforce improvement, I believe, wanted to erase the criminal record of people that had minor offenses in the past, and it could show they were rehabilitated and hadn't had any court appearances, or certainly no convictions in a period of time, depending on the kind of crime you're talking about. And so they're going to happen. But it's a matter of whether we would have hearings to see if somebody had been rehabilitated on everybody's application, or if we were going to agree to it. The part I wasn't all that big of a fan of was having the prosecutor's office, instructing folks on how to apply to get their expungements and how to show that they were rehabilitated and what to do. I mean, that's either up to the defendant to hire a lawyer or talk to a defense attorney to, better their record, to expunge the crime. And it's very time consuming. And we, even during the pandemic, when this expungement stuff started coming through, we were still pretty darn busy because people were still committing crimes, even though we weren't getting to the courthouse as much. The reviewing and charging and arraigning and pretrial hearings were still going on.
Wow.
So we I wasn't a big fan of holding these clinics, but I've signed a lot of consents on the expungement applications.
And again, obviously, on minor case, obviously misdemeanor.
Yeah, they're mostly misdemeanors.
Some felonies.
Some felonies that are old and nonviolent, and possession of 2 ounces of marijuana or more up until 5 years ago or so was a felony.
Interesting.
And with all the things that comes along with being a felon, in some states you lose your right to vote, you can't hunt or possess a firearm. Job applications are limited. You certainly can't work as a federal job if you've got a felony. So those are important things to help people out with.
Down to about a minute and a half.
Oh, gee.
Okay, boy, we could talk, could have taken another hour, but I know you have better things to do. Caseload, roughly what your caseload, Jim, for criminal cases, do you know?
We were just running it, and my deputies are a little mad at me because I think they said 1,600 cases in my name. But that's because
in your name?
That's inflated. That's very inflated. Usually I'm a little under 1,000. But I had my Title 23 deputy leave and couldn't fill the position for a while, almost a year. Title 23 is the motor vehicle, DWI, DLS, negligent operation, that kind of stuff. And so I doubled up and was doing the cases I usually assign to myself, plus the DWIs and the DLSs and the leaving the scene of the accidents and stuff. And that added a lot of numbers. But especially with the COVID situation, and a lot of them are now almost 2 years old, they're highly settlable, and certainly is not going to back up the trial docket.
Wow. Boy, sounds like a staggering number of cases out there.
There are.
I guess on that note, we're going to have to call it a day. But Jim Hughes, the longtime state's attorney in Franklin County, really appreciate the time. And something tells me we could maybe knock off one more hour at some point. But
well, thank
anyway,
you. And
thanks, Jim. A long time as public service in Franklin County.
Yep, Groundhog Day '87 till just about 2023.
Anyway, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you.
I'm Richard Cowperthwait for Northwest Access TV. We'll see you next time. See ya.